this, which includes a lot of elbow flexion, so a lot of biceps, just pull it back. So you're doing more shoulder extension, less elbow flexion. You won't be able to lift as heavy weights as you, depends on your core. Now, let's go for the lats. When you go for the lats, you can either have this grip or this grip. What's the difference? First, in order for you to benefit the most, remember, this is free weight, so you're challenging the gravity, right? So you need to pull the weight as much vertically up as you can, okay? Because it's pulling me vertically down. For this reason, try to bend forward as much as you can. Because the more you bend, the more you can do it vertically up. So the more you can benefit from the exercise. But in order to do that, you need a strong core. If you don't have a strong core, what do?
Machine.
Exactly, on the machine, and you pull the cable. Okay? Now, if let's say we want to do it here. We want to pull in a way that our elbows are closer to the body. Now, if we have a pronated grip, it's harder. Because you need strong forearms. Otherwise, you're going to be doing this. Okay? So, the disadvantage is that it's harder. The advantage, when you're doing it with a pronated grip, you're engaging your biceps less. When you're doing it with a supinated grip, the disadvantage is that there is more biceps engaged, but the advantage, the technique is perfect. There is no way that your elbows go far. You're literally breaking your wrist. No one will do it. So the technique will be perfectly fine, but there will be more biceps engaged. In here, you need to focus more on the technique, but you will be engaging your back or your lats more because you're engaging your biceps less.
What about
when you do the movement, the most important thing, again, this part between elbow and shoulder needs to remain fixed, and this part is only moving. Exactly. And when you do it this way, the bar is going towards your skull. This is why, as if you're crushing your skull, this is why it's called skull crush. Okay? So, that's it.
But what if you extend your elbows?
Allowing your shoulder to move back down. So, this remains fixed, and you're just moving this part. Okay? Yes. Alright? So that's for the kickback. Now, in this way, what are you doing? Moving it away. Yeah. Extending it away from the body. So you're going to be doing transverse abduction with a wider moment arm, plus you're not doing this. You're not using your trapezius to help. You can stretch your chest. But what's the difference? Remember how to think. Exercise joints muscles.
Yeah.
So let's do the chest fly. And the chest fly one, which joints are engaged?
Elbow.
Chest.
Joints.
Shoulder.
Joint. It's just the shoulder.
Elbow and shoulder.
Okay? Transverse abduction. So you have chest and a little help from the anterior elbow. That's it. In the bench press, what's going to happen? Which joints?
Elbows.
Shoulder and
Shoulders.
elbow. So we're doing elbow extension. So in addition to the transverse abduction that is taking place, there is an elbow extension. So you now have like major anterior deltoid and transverse. And this is technically the reason why in bench press you can lift always more weight than you do in chest flies, because you have more muscles engaged. Okay? Now in both exercises you are engaging your chest pretty well. But that's the difference between the two movements. So it's a variation, so you hit your chest in a different way, so you're going to see slightly different results. So for the chest fly, we start wrist, elbow, shoulder, same position. We try to draw the largest arch possible and then we go up. Now, one important thing about the range of motion. When we go down, for the fly, okay? So it's better to stop at this position. Why? Because at this position, your chest is already stretched. If we go further down, what's going to happen is, remember, you have a weight here that is pushing you down. So when the muscle is extremely stretched, it's not gonna be able to work properly. So you're gonna be putting a lot of tension on your joint because now your muscle is weak. So this is where you can hurt your shoulder. But as long as you stop here, you're already stretching the muscle, you're benefiting the muscle, and you are on the safe side. So as a coach, just stand behind your client and make sure that they stop here and then they go back up. Okay? Thank you so much. Position that allows you to do the movement in an efficient way. Exactly. So notice how many trials we're doing until we reach the point. Now we're doing it perfectly. Okay? So the only challenge is to get to this position. So here's what I'm gonna ask you. Just move your, okay? Just sit on the bench, please. Okay? Just have one leg forward. Okay? And this is where your forward leg needs to be. So now I want you to stand up and keep your foot in this exact same spot. Okay? Now this is where you can put your leg on the bench and you have a stable position to do the exercise. Okay? So instead of doing several trials, just simply sit on the bench, move your leg forward and just stand up. You got your stable position. Okay? In here, you're mimicking the squat. It's literally the same. So, if you have the weight in here, it's a front squat, your back will be more straight, so farther away from your knee, so more quads. If you have your weight on your back will be slightly forward, so closer to your knee, farther away from your hip, so less quads, more glutes. Okay? If you are not comfortable having the weight or the bar on your shoulders, in this way, you can simply grab the dumbbells and do the movements. Alright? Thank you so much. Until it reaches the position, I use my elbows to go up. I do the exercise. When I'm done, I have it on the floor. I still have the space, so I simply move it forward and I stand up regularly. Okay? Always remember, safety comes first. Or you stretch your hamstrings, so you engage your hamstrings more. So if you want to have more hamstrings engagement, you move your feet forward. If you want to keep it glute focused, just keep your feet in a 90 degrees angle at the level of your knee. And just go all the way down for a full range of motion, all the way up. Now, one more thing, or one last thing. Try to have your neck forward. Okay? When you have your neck forward while doing the exercise, you stop engaging your back, so you engage your glutes furthermore. Okay? So when you lift up, yes. Okay? So go for a full lock, but keep your neck forward. If you have your neck backward, while going up, you might be using your back. So to prevent any use of the back, keep your neck forward, you stop using your back, so you put all tension on your glutes. Alright? Thank you so much. This needs to be stable. Okay? If it's light in weight, whenever the client goes up, it might slide backward and the client might fall. Number two, to make sure that your client will not fall, it's always better to have your entire upper back on the bench. So can you move? Yes. Okay? So now it's much safer. Remember, always safety first. So make sure that your upper back is entirely on the bench. It's not to engage your glutes more, it's to be safer, to make sure that your client will not fall. So from this position, what do? You simply go down, okay, and up. So what are you doing? Again, hip extension. Okay, so you're increasing the angle. In here, the most important thing is to do it fully all the way up. Okay, so squeeze your glutes up because this is where you are benefiting the most. Hip. Or we're doing hip extension. So the angle was like this. When we moved up, it's now 180, so we increased the angle, so hip extension. Now, imagine with me the following. If the client in this position has a weight, like a bar, okay? When your client goes up, what's gonna happen to the bar? The bar will not be elevated vertically up, it's gonna go diagonally up. Okay? So, when we are in the upward position, if the client is holding the bar here, if he relaxes his arms, what's going to happen to the bar? It's going to go towards the face. So technically, we're not lifting the entire amount of weight with our glutes. Some of the weight is lifted by the shoulder, or our shoulder is helping us in the end range of motion. Slightly bend forward, so you bend forward. You grab the bar. Once you grab the bar, there is still some distance. You eliminate this distance by sitting down. Next, chest up, and then you lift the bar up. Now you're in this position. Once you are in this position, what you need to be doing is the following. You can literally have the bar slide on your legs to make sure that your bar is not going any far away from or farther away from your body. Because when this goes farther away from your body, to lift it up, you're going to use your back. And when this is like 50, 60, 70, 80, you're going to hurt your back. So make sure that the bar is always next to your body. Now, to make sure that it is always next to the body and you're doing the exercise in the proper technique, here's what you need to do. In order for this bar to move vertically down, you need to give it space. So, if you move your knees a lot, notice what's going to happen. I'm going to slide it on my thigh, but I'm going to do it in the wrong way. So I'm going to use my knees a lot. Instead of doing a lot of hip hinge, I'm going to be using my knees. When you use your knees, the bar is moving forward. Okay? Because it's sliding on my leg, but I'm using my knees. So in order to give space for this bar to go vertically down, it needs a space. How am I allowing the space to happen? By moving my hip. So when you move your hip backward, notice now the bar is touching my legs, right? I'm going to keep the bar in this position and I'm going to move my hip. Now there is space for the bar to go vertically down instead of going forward. When in this position, I don't have space. So similarly to what we did with the passive straight leg raise, we ask the client just to elevate their lower back a little bit and then relax. Okay, so you can relax. Now, I'm feeling a certain pressure. I shouldn't lose this pressure, or it can increase, but it never needs to be lost. So I'm going to ask you to go all the way up with your legs. Okay, so this is where we start. In this position, the client is relaxed. Here, the abs are not really engaged. And I feel a lot of pressure on my hand because the back is fully in contact with the floor. Now, try to go slowly. Okay? Okay, keep on going. Okay, that's great, you're not a beginner. Okay, so it barely, it's not even changing, I still feel the pressure. Okay, and then we're going to go back up. Okay, alright, so that's how it is now. Let's say that he's a beginner, or the client is a beginner. What's going to happen is, whenever the client lowers their leg, okay, they're going to reach a position, for example, let's say here, where their lower back will arch. So this is when you ask your client to stop here and go back up. So this will be my client's range of motion. So they go back down, they reach this position, back up please. Okay? Because I'm already feeling an arch in this position. So if they keep on going down, this arch will increase, so more pressure on the lower back without engagement of the abs. So you limit the range of motion to this point. Okay? Thank you so much. And now same thing, we move up. Okay, we hold a few seconds and then we relax. Okay, and we do this for 10 repetitions. For the T, now you have your arms exactly right next to your shoulder. Again, we lift them up, we hold for a few seconds and then we relax and we do these for 10 repetitions. W, you have to bend your elbows. Exactly. Okay, now lift your elbows up. Exactly. So we hold a few seconds and then we relax. Finally, for the letter O, have your arms please on your lower back, and again, lift your elbows up.
Walang gumalaw.
This one is the hardest. Okay? Now you're smiling, but whenever you get okay? Now, the last one is the, again, the O is the hardest one. But the most important thing to do the technique correct, which was done here perfectly. So only the elbows needs to go up. Okay? Now, for the Superman. Now, so kindly just imagine you're Superman, okay? And then lift your entire upper back with your head up. Without your legs. Yeah, exactly. So we hold 5 seconds, depends on whichever the client can last. We relax and then we do it again for 10 repetitions. Okay? Now, right now you're feeling the pressure at the level of your upper back. To feel it more at the level of your lower back, while you lift your arms up, lift your legs up as well.
Up your legs.
Okay, so
Superman! Wait, picture.
hand was just on the floor. Okay? I was doing this. I wasn't lifting my chest up. And the Superman, I need to be doing this. Okay? So I'm lifting my entire chest and head up. And I hold as much as I can. Now, in this way, I'm checking or I'm engaging my upper back. If you want to have more tension on your lower back, while you are lifting your hands, we lift the legs.
So this exercise is good for those people who have
Erector
scoliosis?
Not just scoliosis, all the other people that need to strengthen their core, especially their back. Okay? So for the second variation of the Superman, if you want to move it to the lower back, so you just lift your hands up and your legs up. And once you move your legs up, automatically you feel the tension at the level of your lower back. Okay? Now, who or which clients can benefit from this exercise? One, scoliosis, for example, because they need to have stronger core, and the back is part of that core. Remember when we did the McGill endurance test? We hold it in this position, and then we hold in the position where our hip is on the edge, and we are helping the client by touching or by fixing their legs, and then we did the side planks. Remember in the results, if flexion over extension is not okay, side over extension is not okay either, so where's my weakness? Erector spine. So how to improve this? Superman. Because you need to engage your erector spine or your back core specifically. Letter D. So now you are in this position, and what do? You lift your arms up, you hold for a few seconds, and then you relax. Same thing, you lift up, you hold a few seconds, and then you relax. Okay?
How about your chest, that one, Doc? It will, if ever you lie down, it should stay on the floor or it will
Your
be hard?
chest.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very important question. Now, we can say it from now. In any of these 5, the I, Y, T, W, O, in none of them your chest or your upper body needs to go up. So it's just the shoulders that are going up. Okay? So you do not lift your chest and neck and head up. So your neck and chest are relaxed. You're just moving your shoulders. Okay? Just shoulders. You're not doing this. Okay? So we don't do this. This is a different exercise. This is the Superman. We're gonna reach it in a few minutes. Okay? So in any of these, you're not gonna you're not gonna be doing this chest up movement. Okay? So just shoulders to work on the retractors. Right? So once you're done with the T, W is when you do this, and again, in this position, you lift up. Okay? Again, you're not doing this. You're here, and you're just lifting you're just retracting. So elbows needs to be lifted up. Okay? The final one is O. O is whenever you have your arms here on your lower back, and what you need to do is to move your elbows up. So from this position, we do this.
No.
Okay? Again, we're not lifting our entire upper body, so we're just lifting the elbows. Alright? So this is the IYTWO. For each one, you do like 10 repetitions. In each repetitions, you need to hold. So it's not like this.
10.
1, 2.
How many
3,
seconds,
4.
Doc? 10,
Okay.
10 to 15. How many seconds you hold?
Oh, so you can hold for like 1, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, depending on your client. Okay? Just focus or pay attention to one thing. this exercise, you're gonna be mainly asking client with weakness in these muscles to perform. So they're not gonna be able to hold for a lot of time to keep my equilibrium. So it's harder when I move. Next, to make it even harder, you stand on one leg and you do the same movements in all planes, in all 3 planes, okay? Next, I mean, it's definitely, now I'm doing, sounds like I'm dancing or I don't know what I'm doing, but technically, whenever you have a client, you're gonna pinpoint exactly what to do. So you're gonna tell them, for example, I want you from, in this position, you start with this position, I want you to have your arms up, I want you to move to the right, okay? Then move forward, okay? Then move to the left, all right? And let's do that 10 more times, for example. Now I want you to do the exact same thing while you're in this position. So now it's harder for me to do it. Okay? And then on one leg, and I do it. Now it's even harder. Okay? The harder it gets, the more the benefit, but always remember, same to whatever we did for cardio and resistance training. How we're gonna be moving through these progressions step by step. Okay, so right now I did all 3 at once. Practically, it's never going to happen this way. If you have an elderly client that has them to stand on one leg and do these, they're going to fall. Okay, so it's too soon for them to do those. So they start with the regular ones. Maybe they cannot start with this one either. If they have a very bad balance, you start from here. And you ask them to go in all directions. Okay, then you decrease the base of support till you reach for this spot. Then you go for this one, and then one leg. If you want to have more and more balance, you stand on an unstable surface. So this is where you go for the Bosu ball, for example.
Yes.
Okay? So you stand on it and it's not stable, so it needs or requires more muscular engagement from your side to be able to remain balanced. If you want to go furthermore, you do an exercise on the Bosu ball. So you do a squat while on the Bosu ball, let's say. Okay? But this is a bit more advanced. Okay? So now what we're going to be doing is what we're already done. So we're going to go for shoulder flexion. We're going to try to go all the way up till we touch this one. Okay? Alright, so notice how he was able to reach technically the floor without doing any arch at the level of the lower back, so there is no tightnesses here. No tightness in the pec major, nor anterior deltoid, nor latissimus dorsi, nor serratus anterior. Okay? If for him to reach this part, he had to arch his back, there is tightness. If we didn't reach the floor, there is tightness. Okay? Now, the second part is whenever we try to, we're gonna be lying on our stomach with our arms next to us here, okay, and try to lift them up as much as you can.
Like this?
Yeah, yes please. Okay, so here again, we are able to reach the 30 degrees, which is a little bit, so there is no tightness at the level of the biceps. Okay, now there might be, you can relax. There might be a small tightness because I don't know if you noticed it. It was shaking. Okay, so we might be having a little tightness at the level of the biceps. All right. Thank you so much.
Kakakantot lang yan kagabi, kaya
So this is
shaking.
for the reminder. This test is to check whether we have tightness at the level of the hamstrings or not. So what we need to do is to place one arm below the lower back. And in the second hand, we're going to be lifting the client's leg up passively. Okay? So the client needs to be relaxed. Alright? So we have one hand under the lower back. If you feel that you cannot move or you cannot place it, you just simply ask the client to lift it up a little bit and then relax. Okay? Now, whatever pressure you feel now, it's going to increase whenever you move the leg up. So when this pressure increases, you stop elevating the leg and you check the angle. Whenever you see the pressure, if the angle is lesser than 80 degrees, which is almost here, you have tightness. If it's more than 80 degrees, there is no tightness. Okay? When you elevate the leg, you need to make sure that your knee is always extended. So this is why you grab it from the calves. So We're gonna move up, no pressure, no pressure, no pressure. Okay, now I think can feel the pressure, but it's already at 80 degrees, so there is no tightness. Okay, and while I was elevating the leg, the client was not resisting the knee flexion. So the client was not doing this. He wasn't putting any, I didn't feel any pressure on my hand for the client to bend the knee. If you feel this while going up, no need to keep moving forward. Their hamstrings are tight. Okay? So the knee needs to be extended and you elevate up with your hand below the lower back. Once you feel the pressure, you keep going slowly up. Once you feel the pressure increased, you stop and you check the angle. If it's here, for example, tightness. Okay? If it's even below, tightness. If it's all the way here, you're good. Because when it goes beyond this point, it's normal for the hip to go for a posterior pelvic tilt. Alright? Thank you so much. So now,
It's not straight.
Yeah.
Okay.
The leg.
yeah, the leg is fine. It doesn't
fine.
have to be straight. You just need to pull it backward as much as you can.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be straight. So
And
whenever you
here
can,
Again.
yes, please. Okay, so we're barely having any tightnesses here.
No
Okay,
tightness.
no tightness. So the thigh wasn't lifted up, the leg did not move
It will
forward.
tight.
If the hip is up, there is tightness in the iliopsoas, which is here.
From this end.
Okay, just this one.
Ah,
If the leg moved forward,
Forward.
or the foot moved forward, there is tightness in the rectus femoris because it's gonna pull it this way.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, if this is tight only, it's gonna pull this part only.
Okay.
Right? Thank you. For the jump box, I'm gonna ask you to move forward so that your knee is free. Yeah, exactly. So legs are not touching the floor and the knee is free. This is the most important thing. Now, what we're gonna be doing, we're gonna be checking this leg because it's more towards you, so it's easier for you to check. Definitely, practically speaking, we do both legs. Alright? So now what I'm gonna be asking you to do is to grab your right leg, okay, from below your knee with your arms, okay? And just pull it as much as you can towards your chest. You can bend your knee, you don't have to keep it straight. Okay? So you just
You have a tight glutes. You have tight glutes, Boris.
Yes.
okay, so I want you to pull as much as you can.
Pull more.
Yeah, can you
Pull it more. With
That's
power.
his last. That's his last.
Okay. Okay, can you do it again, please? So just relax. Alright? Make sure that your left leg is relaxed. Okay?
Stay.
So just relax your leg, and now, whenever you can, just grab your right leg and just move it backward as much as you can. Okay? So here, the thigh wasn't lifted up, the leg didn't really move forward, so we didn't get any tightnesses. However, the client is not able to do this test at this moment because apparently we're having some sorenesses from previous workouts. Okay? Thank you so much, but can we have another volunteer? If you are able to touch your wall with the knee without twisting and without elevating your heel, you have a good ankle mobility. If you don't, you need to work on that ankle mobility. How do you work on the ankle mobility? You can stretch your calves. If you want to stretch your calves, you do opposite to its action. The action of the calves is plantar flexion. So simply when you do dorsiflexion, you are stretching those calves. Okay? So dorsiflexion, you are stretching those calves. If you have a wall, you can do this, and you move forward, you are decreasing the angle at the level of the ankle. So you are doing a dorsiflexion, you're stretching the calves. Now, one important thing about stretching the calves is the following. Similarly to how we train them, so if we want to hit the gastrocnemius more, we extend the knee. If you want to hit the soleus more, you flex the knee. Okay? Same applies with the stretch. So if you are stretching the calves, dorsiflexion, if your knee is extended, you're stretching the gastrocnemius mostly. If you want to move this stretch more towards the soleus, just bend your knee. When you bend your knee, you're stretching the soleus more. So similar to training the calves, you need to be training both. Stretch both of them. Okay? So train both of them, stretch both of them. What's the difference between the two? Just the knee. If it's extended, whether you're training or stretching, you're hitting the gastrocnemius more, not just the gastrocnemius more. If you have knee flexed, whether you are training it or you are stretching it, you're hitting the soleus more. Okay? Now, Thomas test. Can you have a volunteer for the Thomas test? Is phase 2. In phase 2, this is when you can start performing interval training. Now, in interval training, you can start with the easiest thing, which is 1:5 ratio, or you can start with 1:3 ratio under one condition, which is that the duration of the interval is just 30 seconds. So if you want to go for more than 30 seconds per interval, go for a 1:5 ratio. If you want to start with 1:3 ratio, make sure that your interval is not longer than 30 seconds. Okay? 1:3 ratio for a 30 seconds interval means 10 seconds of high intensity followed by
50.
No, it needs to be less than 10. So if it's 1:3, it should be around 8 seconds of high intensity versus 32 seconds of
Low intensity.
low. Like 5 or 6 seconds, you multiply 5 by 3, no, that's 20. So somewhere between 5 to 7 seconds. Okay? To make it easier, not to stick to 30 seconds, just go for 1:5 and you can go for higher than 30 seconds. Okay? You can either go for a steady state but at higher intensities. And here you can use circuit training, you can use the classes, you can use equipments, you can use the assessments of power that we just discussed. So all of these can be options for you to do cardio in phase 2. Why we aim to go for phase 2? Because this is where we see more results. When it comes to weight loss, when it comes to improving our cardiovascular fitness level. Phase 3 is for whom? Anyone that needs to go for a competition. Now, for resistance training. In phase 1, stability, mobility. So practically what are we doing in this phase? First, we do the assessments. Based on the assessments, we come up with the weaknesses that we need to be working on. So this is the first part. We're improving all the weaknesses that we saw based on the assessments. In addition to these weaknesses, to improve your client's stability and mobility, you need to be working on the core and balance, and you need to be working on their flexibility or stretches for the muscles so that they are able to do the exercises in a proper technique. Okay? So, for a beginner, let's say in the first couple of weeks, you will put a program that is mainly focusing on these. Assessments, improving the weaknesses, improving exercises for the core that we will be discussing tomorrow, stretches or flexibility exercises. This is phase 1. Now, this phase might take 2 weeks to be completed, it might take 3 weeks, 4 weeks, depending on each client, depending on the number of weaknesses, depending on whether your client has a good core engagement or not, has a good balance or not, has a lot of tightnesses or not. Okay? How do we know all these assessments? When you do the McGill, you're checking your client's score. Flexion over extension, side over extension, etc. If everything is fine, your core is good. Static balance and dynamic balance. The Y test, okay, and the universal test. If they have a good balance, this is a tick as well. Hip mobility, spine, shoulder mobility, ankle mobility. If there is no tightnesses, then your client can directly move to phase 2. So you classify your client as phase 2, so you directly start with the exercise techniques. If your client is having any weaknesses here, you classify them as phase 1 and you start improving those weaknesses. You're doing deflection, which is whenever you were engaging your abs in this position, you divide it by the time that you took in the extension, whenever you were engaging your back. Okay? This ratio needs to be less than 1. What do we mean less than 1? it means that the extensors needs to be stronger than the flexors. Because if you think about it, you have your back and you have your abs. So the back is stronger, it should be stronger, so it should last, or it should have a better endurance. Because if it doesn't, you're gonna end up having this. Okay? So this or these, this ratio needs to be less than 1. Alright? Now, the second one is you divide the right side plank to the left side plank. So the time where you were holding on your right side divided by the time you were holding on your left side. So this is just for these. You're not comparing them to the anterior or the posterior one. You just compare the time in this position on your right side to the time when you were doing side planks on your left side. The difference or the result should be very close to 1. So you make sure that you don't have any muscular imbalances, so that your right side is equally strong than your left side. So the difference should not be more than 0.05. Okay? So the number, so you put right side plank over left, the result should be very close to 1. When we say that it shouldn't be greater than 0.05, so it needs to be within 0.95 and 1.05. Okay, so it should be equal to 1. If not, it should be a difference of not more than 0.05. If it's different than that, this means that you have one side stronger than the other. So you need to work on your muscular imbalance. Finally, you divide your right side or your side core over the extension. So you divide the average time here, because you should have the exact same time on your right or your left. So you take one of the two, either the right or the left, because they should be very similar. If they are farther away, you just do the average, and you divide this number by the time where you held this position. So you have the side divided by the extension. When you have the side divided by the extension, the number should be less than 0.75, because your back should have much bigger endurance than just one side of your core. So not just less than 1, it should be less than 0.75. If you do not have these numbers or these ratios, if you're having a problem here or there, you need to be working on your back core muscles. If you're having a problem here, you need to adjust this muscular imbalance. So you have one side that is stronger than the other. So you should take these into consideration in your training program. Okay? Tendinosis, biceps femoris. The reason why we call it biceps femoris is because it has 2 heads or 2 origins. Okay? So the reason why we call it biceps, bi means 2. So 2 heads. It has a long head and a short head. So if you have, it's one muscle, but it has 2 heads. So a long head and a short head. Similar to the biceps brachii or the biceps of the arm, but it's at the level of the femur. Okay? The thing is the following. The long head of the biceps femoris, the semitendinosus, and the semimembranosus, all of them, they originate at the level of the hip. Okay? And they insert the biceps femoris on the lateral side of the knee, semimembranosus, semitendinosus on the medial side of the. Okay? The short head of the biceps femoris is the only one that originates at the level of the femur. It doesn't start from there. Okay? And it's inserted same place, at the lateral side of the knee. Now, what does this imply? If a muscle is not reaching a certain joint, it cannot move that joint, right? If I engage my quadriceps, can I do elbow flexion? It's impossible. Why? Because the quads are not attached to my elbow. Okay? So for a muscle to cause a movement at a certain joint, it needs to be attached to that joint. It needs to go through that joint. So for the short head of the biceps femoris, it cannot do any movement at the level of my hip. Because it doesn't extend, doesn't reach my hip. It stops here. On the other hand, the long head of the biceps femoris, semitendinosus and semimembranosus, they can. Because all of them, they originate at the level of the hip. All four are inserted at the level of the knee, so all four can cause the movement at the level of the knee. Right? So among the hamstrings, the long head of the biceps femoris, semitendinosus and semimembranosus, they can cause movements at the level of both hip and knee. The short head of the biceps femoris can only cause a movement at the level of the knee. Anterior side of our thigh. Alright? So, where exactly are they located when it comes to origin and insertion? The rectus, let's start with the vastus. Vastus lateralis is located on the quads, but on the lateral side. Okay? So it's here. Right? Vastus medialis is here. On the median side. Okay? In the middle, we have two muscles. You have the vastus intermedius, which is deep inside, so we cannot really touch it. And on the top of it, which is the one that we can touch, is the rectus subluxus. So again, on the inner part, you have the vastus medialis. On the outer part, you have the vastus lateralis. Again, inner and outer parts, but in front, not in the back. We're talking about quads. Okay? In the middle, the deeper one that we cannot touch is the vastus intermedius. On top of it, we have the rectus femoris, which is the superficial one. So whenever you're doing like extensions, let's say, when you see just a muscle, like literally in the middle of your thigh, that is pumping upward, this is your rectus femoris. Why? Because the vastus intermedius is deeper inside. You're not going to be able to see it. When you see this line on the side of your thigh, whatever is in front of that line, this is your vastus lateralis. Vastus medialis, it appears mostly here. Like you see a small, like it's like a small ball, for example, literally here. This is where your vastus medialis
Like a shows up.
Yeah, exactly. Okay? So these are our quadriceps muscles. Now, if we want to go for origin and insertion, the only one of these four that originates at the level of the hip is the rectus femoris. All the vastuses, they originate at the level of the feet, definitely on the anterior side. So the only one that originates at the level of the hip is the rectus femoris. All four, they are inserted at the level of the knee. So, all four, they can cause a movement at the level of the knee, but only one can cause a movement at the level of the hip, which is the rectus femoris. So for this reason, when it comes to action, vastus lateralis, medialis, and intermedius, their main action is knee extension. Again, the muscle is located in front, so it's going to pull your leg forward. If you think about it, origin, insertion, and as a rope, the origin is here, insertion is there, so when you pull that rope, you're going to do this. So knee extension, right? Rectus femoris, in addition to the knee extension, it can cause also a hip extension. Why? Because it originates at the level of the hip, so it can move that. Medius and minimus, they are also engaged when you do hip extension. So, if you want to hit your medius and minimus more than your TFL, while doing abduction, simply, before doing the abduction, just place your leg slightly backwards, okay, and do the hip abduction. You will be engaging your gluteus medius and minimus more. If you want to hit your TFL more, just place your leg slightly forward and do the abduction. You will be putting more tension on your TFL. Practically speaking, very few people are interested about the TFL. If I'm going on stage, I will be interested on the TFL. But most of the clients will be interested about their glutes. So this is why, in order to hit those medius and minimus more, just place your leg slightly backward and do the abduction. Okay? Another variation could be the following. Medius and minimus, in addition to all these actions, they do internal rotation. Okay? So if you want to further engage your glutes, place your leg backward, internally rotate your leg, and then do the abduction. You hit them further. Okay? So again, medius and minimus, TFL, all of them, they do hip abduction. To put more tension on these, again, when we say more tension, it doesn't mean that the other muscle is not engaged. So all three are engaged whenever you do hip abduction. Alright? But if you want to put more tension on the medius and minimus, while doing the abduction, go for hip extension and internal rotation. So extend your hip, internally rotate it, and then go for the abduction. You hit the medius and minimus more. Right? If you want to hit the TFL more, just instead of going for a hip extension, go for a flexion. Do not internally rotate, just small flexion and abduction. You hit the TFL more. Medius and minimus, they are also engaged when you do hip extension. So, if you want to hit your medius and minimus more than your TFL while doing abduction, simply, before doing the abduction, just place your leg slightly backwards, okay, and do the hip abduction. You will be engaging your gluteus medius and minimus more. If you want to hit your TFL more, just place your leg slightly forward and do the abduction. You will be putting more tension on your TFL. Practically speaking, very few people are interested about the TFL. If I'm going on stage, I will be interested on the TFL. But most of the clients will be interested about their glutes. So this is why, in order to hit those medius and minimus more, just place your leg slightly backward and do the abduction. Okay? Another variation could be the following. Medius and minimus, in addition to all these actions, they do internal rotation. Okay? So if you want to further engage your glutes, place your leg backward, internally rotate your leg, and then do the abduction. You hit them further. Okay? So again, medius and minimus, TFL, all of them, they do hip abduction. To put more tension on these, again, when we say more tension, it doesn't mean that the other muscle is not engaged. So all three are engaged whenever you do hip abduction. Alright? But if you want to put more tension on the medius and minimus, while doing the abduction, go for hip extension and internal rotation. So extend your hip, internally rotate it, and then go for the abduction. You hit the medius and minimus more. Right? If you want to hit the TFL more, just instead of going for a hip extension, go for a flexion. Do not internally rotate, just small flexion and abduction. You hit the TFL more. This is the posterior deltoid, which we will be discussing definitely in a few minutes when we talk about the deltoid all in all. So, technically speaking, when we say upper back, we're talking about trapezius and posterior deltoid. When we talk about lower back, if we're talking about the core, quadratus lumborum. If we're talking about whatever we can see or we can touch, it's the latissimus dorsi. Okay? This is why sometimes you hear some people telling you that when you do pull-ups or lat pull-downs, you get this V shape. So what is this V shape about? whenever you are engaging or whenever you have a strong lats, you have a bigger area here and it's tight. Okay? And whenever you have broad shoulders, it's gonna show as if you have a V shape. Okay? But it's not just the lats, it's not just the upper back, it's having good upper back and lats, you get this V shape. Alright? Now, let's start with the trapezius. The trapezius is technically divided into 3 parts. Since it's a big muscle, you have the upper part, you have the middle part, and you have the lower part. When it comes to origin and insertion, the trapezius will originate in this area. So all this area is the origin. Technically the spine and starting from the skull. Okay? And they insert on the shoulder. So this is where they will insert. This is their insertion. Okay? Now, when it comes to the origin, we just need to know that it's on the spine. The occipital bone of the skull, one of the skull bones, and on the spine. As for the insertion, it's important to know the insertion of the trapezius for the following reason. Any idea what's this? What's this muscle? Not the bone, the muscle. Here.
It's trapezius.
Yes, it's the trapezius. Okay? So although it's a back muscle, but it's inserted on the shoulder and it goes all the way around and goes back to the skull. So whatever we see here is the trapezius. Okay? Definitely the upper part of the trapezius. So the insertion of the trapezius, if you check what's written in the book, they will tell you spine of the scapula, which is here on the back. You have the something that we hold here, which is part of the scapula, which is literally here. If you remember when we were discussing the bones, when we said this is the scapula, it has 2 hooks. We said that the scapula is attached to the clavicle. So the attachment site of the scapula, this is where the trapezius inserts and goes all the way to the clavicle. Medius and minimus, they are also engaged when you do hip extension. So, if you want to hit your medius and minimus more than your TFL while doing abduction, simply, before doing the abduction, just place your leg slightly backwards, okay, and do the hip abduction. You will be engaging your gluteus medius and minimus more. If you want to hit your TFL more, just place your leg slightly forward and do the abduction. You will be putting more tension on your TFL. Practically speaking, very few people are interested about the TFL. If I'm going on stage, I will be interested on the TFL. But most of the clients will be interested about their glutes. So this is why, in order to hit those medius and minimus more, just place your leg slightly backward and do the abduction. Okay? Another variation could be the following. Medius and minimus, in addition to all these actions, they do internal rotation. Okay? So if you want to further engage your glutes, place your leg backward, internally rotate your leg, and then do the abduction, you hit them further. Okay? So again, medius and minimus, TFL, all of them, they do hip abduction. To put more tension on these, again, when we say more tension, it doesn't mean that the other muscle is not engaged. So all 3 are engaged whenever you do hip abduction. Alright? But if you want to put more tension on the medius and minimus, while doing the abduction, go for hip extension and internal rotation. So extend your hip, internally rotate it, and then go for the abduction. You hit the medius and minimus more. Right? If you want to hit the TFL more, just instead of going for a hip extension, go for a flexion. Do not internally rotate, just small flexion and abduction. You hit the TFL more. Anterior side of our thigh. Alright? So, where exactly are they located when it comes to origin and insertion? The rectus, let's start with the vastus. Vastus lateralis is located on the quads, but on the lateral side. Okay, so it's here. Right? Vastus medialis is here, on the medial side. Okay? In the middle, we have two muscles. You have the vastus intermedius, which is deep inside, so we cannot really touch it. And on the top of it, which is the one that we can touch, is the rectus subluxus. So again, on the inner part, you have the vastus medialis. On the outer part, you have the vastus lateralis. Again, inner and outer parts, but in front, not in the back. We're talking about quads. Okay? In the middle, the deeper one that we cannot touch is the vastus intermedius. On top of it, we have the rectus subluxus, which is the superficial one. So whenever you're doing like extensions, let's say, when you see just a muscle, like literally in the middle of your thigh, that is pumping upward, this is your rectus subluxus. Why? Because the vastus intermedius is deeper inside. You're not going to be able to see it. When you see this line on the side of your thigh, whatever is in front of that line, this is your vastus lateralis. Vastus medialis, it appears mostly here. Like you see a small, like it's like a small ball, for example, literally here. This is where your vastus medialis
Like a shows up.
yeah, exactly. Okay? So these are our quadriceps muscles. Now, if we want to go for origin and insertion, the only one of these four that originates at the level of the hip is the rectus subluxus. All the vastuses, they originate at the level of the feet, definitely on the anterior side. So the only one that originates at the level of the hip is the rectus subluxus. All four, they are inserted at the level of the knee. So, all four, they can cause a movement at the level of the knee, but only one can cause a movement at the level of the hip, which is the rectus subluxus. So for this reason, when it comes to action, vastus lateralis, medialis, and intermedius, their main action is knee extension. Again, the muscle is located in front, so it's going to pull your leg forward. If you think about it, origin, insertion, and as a rope, the origin is here, insertion is there, so when you pull that rope, you're going to do this. So knee extension, right? Rectus femoris, in addition to the knee extension, it can cause also a hip extension. Why? Because it originates at the level of the hip, so it can move that hip. Tendinosis, biceps femoris. The reason why we call it biceps femoris is because it has two heads or two origins. Okay? So the reason why we call it biceps, bi means two. So two heads. It has a long head and a short head. So there you have. It's one muscle, but it has two heads. So a long head and a short head. Similar to the biceps brachii or the biceps of the arm, but it's at the level of the femur. Okay? The thing is the following. The long head of the biceps femoris, the semitendinosus, and the semimembranosus, all of them, they originate at the level of the hip. Okay? And they insert the biceps femoris on the lateral side of the knee, semimembranosus, semitendinosus on the medial side of the. Okay? The short head of the biceps femoris is the only one that originates at the level of the femur. It doesn't start from there. Okay? And it's inserted same place, at the lateral side of the knee. Now, what does this imply? If a muscle is not reaching a certain joint, it cannot move that joint. Right? If I engage my quadriceps, can I do elbow flexion? It's impossible. Why? Because the quads are not attached to my elbow. Okay? So for a muscle to cause a movement at a certain joint, it needs to be attached to that joint. It needs to go through that joint. So for the short head of the biceps femoris, it cannot do any movement at the level of my hip because it doesn't extend, doesn't reach my hip, it stops here. On the other hand, the long head of the biceps femoris, semitendinosus and semimembranosus, they can, because all of them, they originate at the level of the hip. All four are inserted at the level of the knee, so all four can cause the movement at the level of the knee. Right? So among the hamstrings, the long head of the biceps femoris, semitendinosus and semimembranosus, they can cause movements at the level of both hip and knee. The short head of the biceps femoris can only cause a movement at the level of the muscle, the chest. Okay? Or the pectoralis major. We're going to be discussing it in a few seconds or a few minutes. Okay? So the main muscle is the primer. It's what doing most of the job, and this is the one who's benefiting the most. Now the antagonist is the muscle that is on the opposite. So for chest, it's the upper back. What does the upper back do? They relax. Antagonist always relaxes when the agonist is engaged. Okay, when the biceps contracts, the triceps relax. When the quads contract, the hamstrings relax, etc. Okay? Now, synergists are helpers. They help the main muscle, or they help the primer. Okay? For example, whenever you're doing push-ups or bench press, in addition to your chest, your anterior deltoid is helping a little bit, and your triceps is helping a little bit as well, because you're doing elbow extension. Okay? They are not the main muscles, they are not the target of the exercise. Our target is not to benefiting the hamstrings nor the anterior deltoid. Our main target is the primer. But while doing the movement, these other muscles are helping the main muscle, and they are called the synergists.
Secondary muscles also the same?
Secondary muscles, same thing. Yes, exactly. So synergists, helpers, secondary muscles, same thing. Okay, they are helping the main muscle or the primer. Okay. Finally, you have the stabilizers. And many times, whenever you are doing exercises, you need some joints to be or to remain stable. For these joints to remain stable, they need muscles to keep them fixed or stable, and these muscles are called the stabilizers. What's the easiest example of a stabilizer?
Again.
So stabilizer, they are responsible to stabilize a certain joint, okay, or a certain part of the body. So what could be the first maybe muscle that comes to your mind that works as a stabilizer, or group of muscles? It's something
The
we
core?
exactly.
Yeah.
Or keep your core engaged. To do what? To keep our spine stable. So for this spine to remain stable, there are muscles all around it helping it to remain stable. So these are the muscles that are called the stabilizers. If I'm doing a squat, okay, the main muscle or the primer is going to be quads and glutes. Those are the main muscles doing the job. But at the same time, my core is engaged. So I can keep my back straight. So these are the fixators. Right? While doing the movement, I'm going to do a slight plantar flexion, because the angle will go from this much to this much. Okay? When you go down, your knees will move slightly forward. So this angle is decreasing. So on the way down, I did a dorsiflexion. When I went up, I did a plantar flexion. So I engaged my calves a little bit. So what do my calves do, or what did my calves do? They assisted me a little bit, so synergist. Both of these muscles are engaged at the same time. We are not able to do any movement. One of them is pulling our elbow towards flexion, the other is pulling it towards extension. So we cannot move. For this reason, every single time the agonist is engaged, for example, the biceps is engaged, the antagonist needs to relax or sleep. Why? To allow the biceps to do elbow flexion. Because when the triceps sleeps, there's no one pulling or going for an elbow extension, so the biceps can do a full elbow flexion. And vice versa. When the triceps wants to go for an elbow extension, the biceps needs to relax. Who's responsible or who's going to tell the other muscle or the antagonist that you need to relax now? It's the muscle sphincter. This is what causes the antagonist to relax. Okay? Because practically speaking, we never think about it. Whenever we do biceps curls, let's say, we're not thinking about sending a message to the triceps asking it to relax. It just happens. Why it happens? Because of the muscle sphincter. Right? 4 movements in all of these 3 planes of motion. Okay? So again, fibrous, no movement. Cartilaginous, very small movement. Synovial, lot of movement. Obviously, we're going to be focusing on these because we want to be performing movements and physical activity. Now, these synovial joints, they allow us to move in these 3 different planes of motion. Now, we have 2 vertical planes, the frontal and the sagittal, and we have 1 horizontal plane, which is the transverse plane. When we say a plane of motion, we mean that we are dividing our body into 2 parts. Okay? So, let's start with the vertical planes. You have the frontal and the sagittal. Sagittal, it's a new word, doesn't ring any bell. Frontal, it sounds like front. Right? So the frontal plane is the plane that is dividing our body into front and back. So it's literally cutting our body in half, like from all the way up, down. So this is the frontal plane. It's dividing the body to front and the back. Sagittal plane is the other vertical. If we divided our body vertically into front and back, so the second opportunity is to divide our body into right and left. This is the sagittal plane. Finally, the transverse plane is what divides our body to upper part and the lower part. So literally here and the middle, horizontal or parallel to the floor. Okay? These joints and how do these joints move? We are talking, or we need to identify what we call the planes of motion. So inside of which our body will be moving. Okay? And we need to differentiate between those 3 types of joints. So let's start by differentiating between the types. First of all, when we say joint, gentlemen, we're not talking about movement. Okay? So a joint by definition is whenever we have 2 or more bones connected together. They doesn't have, or it doesn't have to perform movement or to be able to move. So 2 or more bones connected together, that's a joint. Now, whether this joint is able to do movements or not, whether it's able to do small movement or a big movement, this is what differentiates between the types of joints. So the fibrous joint is a joint that cannot move at all. Example, the skull.
Suture.
Okay?
Suture.
So, yes. Right. So, let's imagine that this is a bone. The upper part and the lower parts of the bone, or the upper and lower heads of the bones, are called epiphyses. So, this is an epiphysis, and this is also epiphysis. Okay? In between, we have what we call the diaphysis. So here, this area, diaphysis. Why we are talking about these 2? Because in between them, we have something that we call epiphyseal plate. So here, we have the epiphyseal plate. Any idea why we're talking about this?
This line consists because the growth of the bone where it appears and then the growth of the bone stops. When it doesn't appear, the body just grows up.
Exactly. Yeah. The epiphyseal plate is the reason why our bones are able to grow taller or to grow in length. So technically speaking, you always hear the fact that we keep on getting taller until we reach a certain age, which is around 18 to 21, and then we stop growing or we stop getting taller. The reason for that is all the long bones, they have an epiphyseal plate, which is the area in between the epiphyses and the diaphyses, from the upper and the lower side. Now, from the day that we are born until we are around 18 years old, this epiphyseal plate will be made of cartilage. Okay? This cartilage is softer than the bone cells. Bone cells are more rigid. Example, your ears are made of cartilage. Okay? We can do anything we want with them, it won't break. Your nose, on the upper part, it's a bone, but on the tip, cartilage. So it doesn't break. Okay? So cartilage are loose. They are not very rigid. So they accept bone cells. So from day one, or from the age of 0 till the age of approximately 18, since this epiphyseal plate is made of cartilage, it keeps on accepting bone cells. So we can put bone cells inside of it. When you keep on putting bone cells inside of it, what do? You put one bone cell, let's say here, and then another one above it. What happens?
It's growing.
Your bone is growing taller. Okay? Because we keep on adding bone cells here and there. So we are getting the epiphyses on both ends go wider and wider, or grow taller and taller, because we keep on adding bone cells here. Okay? And feet, all of these are appendicular skeletons. So again, axial, skull, rib cage and spine, all the rest are the appendicular skeleton. Okay? Now, we learned the names of the bones. Let's talk a little bit about the composition of what we call long bones. And let's see why we need to know about long bones. Each long bone is going to have the following shape. Can I erase this?
Yes.
Literally the movement at the level of your scapula. Obviously, elevation is when you do up, depression when you go back down. So whenever you are doing shrugs, for example, if you're lifting a weight, go this way. So elevation, depression, elevation, depression. Okay. Inversion, eversion. Inversion, eversion is again at the level of the ankle. So inversion, when the inner part of your foot is lifted off the floor. So again, inversion, inner part of the foot is lifted off the floor. Eversion, external part of the foot lifted off the floor. Okay, so again, inversion, eversion. Okay, one movement we're going to be adding to this one here because it's related to something we previously discussed. At the level of the scapula, in addition to the elevation and depression, we have protraction and retraction. Okay? So when we move our shoulders forward, this is protraction. When we move them backward, retraction. So I'm going to write it here. On the plane, remember, it's dividing our body into front and back, right? So again, let's imagine we have a wall in front of us and a wall behind us. So the only way to move is to go sideways. Okay? Sideways. I cannot move, I cannot do flexion and extension anymore. Now, what are the movements that we have? We have two movements which are abduction, adduction. I'm going to pronounce it abduction just for you to be able to grab or to listen to the difference. Okay? So it's called abduction, but I'm going to say it abduction just to differentiate it from adduction because they sound the same. Okay? Now, abduction is when you take your upper or lower limb away from the body. Adduction is when you add them back to the body. So, if my hand is in this position, and it moves away from my body, this is abduction. If I add it back to my body, adduction. So abduction, adduction. Abduction of my hip, adduction of my hip. So adduction, you add them together. Abduction is the other way around.
Away from the center point.
Away from the midline or the
Center point.
the ankle decreases when we raise our toes up. This is dorsiflexion. Okay? So plantar flexion, I'm standing on my toes or on the tip of my toes. Dorsiflexion, I am lifting my toes up, I'm standing on my feet. Okay? So if I move my leg forward, I am decreasing the angle, so flexion. If I move it backward, it's extension. Okay? The hip, if I don't want to move my legs, if I want to move my hip, when I move my hip backward, flexion, I'm decreasing the angle, and then extension, I'm increasing the angle back again. Okay? So forward and backward, flexion, extension. Angle is increased, extension, angle decreases, flexion. 4 movements in all of these 3 planes of motion. Okay? So again, fibrous, no movement, cartilaginous, very small movement, synovial, lot of movement. Obviously, we're going to be focusing on these because we want to be performing movements and physical activity. Now, these synovial joints, they allow us to move in these 3 different planes of motion. Now, we have 2 vertical planes, the frontal and the sagittal, and we have 1 horizontal plane, which is the transverse plane. When we say a plane of motion, we mean that we are dividing our body into 2 parts. Okay? So, let's start with the vertical planes. You have the frontal and the sagittal. Sagittal, it's a new word, doesn't ring any bell. Frontal, it sounds like front.
Front.
Right? So the frontal plane is the plane that is dividing our body into front and back. So it's literally cutting our body in half, like from all the way up, down. So this is the frontal plane. It's dividing the body to front and back. Sagittal plane is the other vertical. If we divided our body vertically into front and back, so the second opportunity is to divide our body into right and left. This is the sagittal plane. Finally, the transverse plane is what divides our body to upper part and the lower part. So literally here and the middle, horizontal or parallel to the floor. Okay? The joints and how do these joints move? We are talking, or we need to identify what we call the planes of motion. So inside of which our body will be moving. Okay? And we need to differentiate between those 3 types of joints. So let's start by differentiating between the types. First of all, when we say joint, gentlemen, we're not talking about movement. Okay? So a joint by definition is whenever we have 2 or more
Connected
bones
together.
connected together.
Yeah.
They doesn't have or it doesn't have to perform movement or to be able to move. So 2 or more bones connected together, that's a joint. Now, whether this joint is able to do movement or not, whether it's able to do small movement or a big movement, this is what differentiates between the types of joints. So the fibrous joint is a joint that cannot move at all. Example, the skull.
Suture.
Okay?
Suture.
So, yes, right. So, more than we are breaking down. And this is how our bones grow bigger in size. Okay? When we are in adulthood ages, they become imbalanced. So we will be breaking the same amount of bones that we are building. So we have 2, let's say, weak bone cells. We break them down and we replace them by 2 new bone cells. So it's balanced. So osteoblasts and osteoclasts, they are working in balance. Okay? When we grow older, there is a chance that the osteoclasts start breaking down more bones than osteoblasts are building. So we now have a negative balance, and this is when we end up having osteoporosis or weak or fragile bones. Because now, for example, we are breaking down 10 bone cells and we are building only 5. So the net is -5. We start losing bone cells. When we start losing bone cells, our bones become weaker, osteoporosis. Okay? Why are we talking about all this? Because we want to reach Wolff's law. Wolff's law is called Wolff's law because whoever discovered it had a family name Wolff. So Wolff's law states the following: whenever you perform resistance training, you are putting tension on your bones. When you put, or in response to this amount of tension placed on the bones, your bones will adapt by getting stronger. Okay? So this is why when we do resistance training, we help our bones getting stronger. So we help, or we try to help in minimizing the chances of osteoporosis in the future. Let's imagine that this is a bone. The upper parts and the lower parts of the bone, or the upper and lower heads of the bones, are called epiphyses. So this is an epiphyses, and this is also epiphyses. Okay? In between, we have what we call the diaphysis. So here, this area, diaphysis. Why we are talking about these two? Because in between them, we have something that we call epiphyseal plate. So here, we have the epiphyseal plate. Any idea why we're talking about this?
This line consists because of growth of the bone where it appears, and then the growth of the bone stops. When it doesn't appear, the body just grows up.
Exactly. The epiphyseal plate is the reason why our bones are able to grow taller or to grow in length. So technically speaking, you always hear the fact that we keep on getting taller until we reach a certain age, which is around 18 to 21, and then we stop growing or we stop getting taller. The reason for that is all the long bones, they have an epiphyseal plate, which is the area in between the epiphyses and the diaphyses, from the upper and the lower side. Now, from the day that we are born until we are around 18 years old, this epiphyseal plate will be made of cartilage. Okay? This cartilage is softer than the bone cells. Bone cells are more rigid. Example, your ears are made of cartilage. Okay? We can do anything we want with them, it won't break. Your nose, on the upper part, it's a bone, but on the tip, cartilage. So it doesn't break. Okay? So cartilage are loose. They are not very rigid. So they accept bone cells. So from day 1, or from the age of 0 till the age of approximately 18, since this epiphyseal plate is made of cartilage, it keeps on accepting bone cells. So we can put bone cells inside of it. When you keep on putting bone cells inside of it, what do? You put one bone cell, let's say here, and then another one above it. What happens?
It's growing.
Your bone is growing taller. Okay? Because we keep on adding bone cells here and there. So we are getting the epiphyses on both ends go wider and wider, or grow taller and taller, because we keep on adding bone cells here. Okay? And feet, all of these are appendicular skeletons. So again, axial, skull, rib cage, and spine, all the rest are the appendicular skeleton. Okay? Now, We learned the names of the bones. Let's talk a little bit about the composition of what we call long bones. And let's see why we need to know about long bones. Each long bone is going to have the following shape. Can I erase this?
Yes.